What's up? Welcome to the first episode of our new podcast, Top Shelf. I'm Jimmy. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm here with Marcus, our other host. How you doing today, Marcus?
It's a cloudy day in Massachusetts, so you know how it is. It's been raining all week, all month. Welcome to summer, eh?
Dude, it's absolutely brutal. I feel like it's been like the worst summer I've had in like a long time.
Yeah,
But
I can agree to that.
yeah, we're bringing you guys this new podcast because we want to talk more about hockey. We feel like there's not too many podcasts in the space, and there's just too much happening with this sport to not get coverage. So today we're going to talk about the draft, the free agency, and some of the wild trades that happened just from this past week. So as we go through these, there's going to be more and more trades happening, especially today. We have the free agency opening up. So I'm sure we're going to miss a lot of these, but we're going to speculate a little bit and see if we can get some predictions, eh? So, first, let's focus on the draft, okay? So, the draft happened a few days ago, and I'm shocked, to be honest. I think that the Ducks fumbled the bag completely. And I know you feel differently, but let me get this out. The Ducks fumbled the bag. Adam Fantilli is going to be what Jack Eichel was to Connor McDavid. I promise you. Hear me out. So Connor Bedard is going to have a career like McDavid. He's not going to win a cup immediately. There's going to be some struggling years. Now that you see Fantilli going to Columbus, that team is ready. They have so many great young players to put next to Fantilli. And I guarantee you, book this, 5 years, Fantilli gets a cup and Bedsy doesn't have one. Go
In
ahead.
Columbus,
In Columbus.
I mean, the Blue Jackets have made some great moves throughout the offseason. I mean, they got Severson, Provorov. That's some good defense to have,
Mhm.
especially with Provorov being a little bit on the older side and Severson just a little bit coming out of his prime, right? He's 28.
Yep.
So the way I see it is if they keep bulking up, and especially in the goaltending department, they get, they have Merzlikins, right? And
Yep.
he's pretty decent, but if they keep developing him well, I mean, they could sneak into the playoffs next year. You never know, but I'm unsure if Fantilli's going to be, playing in Columbus next year, considering the fact that he wants to at least go back to Michigan and try to win a national championship. You know what I'm saying? Because like they've been so close so many times. But for him, he's only a freshman, right?
Yeah.
So he's got a little bit of time to develop. I mean, he's a great player. He won the Hobie Baker, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty good as a freshman. I mean, there's only so little players that have scored like 65 plus points in the NCAA. First person off the top of my head I can think of is Paul Correa back in 1993
Yep.
for University of Maine. And he had a great career too. But I'm just saying, like 5 years for me is a little. I mean, it could happen. You never know. It's sports, right?
Just take like the Vegas Golden Knights, for example, man. You have a team that I don't think they were as great as everybody says they were. I think they were deep and they wanted the cup. And I think when you look at something like Columbus, I'm not putting Adam Fantilli. This isn't even a knock on Leo Carlsson because when you made that prediction, to be fair, I wasn't that shocked. I was more just shocked from the namesake. Like I like Leo Carlsson, but it just felt like Fantilli was just a little bit above that, like it was a must pick sort of situation. And when I see Columbus, I see a team that has Patrick Laine and Johnny Gaudreau on the top line. If Fantilli goes over there and they're looking to give him some line mates to play with, he has two guys who are, I don't want to call Laine a veteran just yet, but he's been in the league for about 6+ years. So those are some guys that could help Fantilli immediately go to Chicago. I know they just got Hall and I know they just got like Foligno, but like those aren't guys that I'm like super excited to see Bedsy play with. So it's not so much of a knock on Carlson because I think Carlson's going to have some great line mates too. Terry Zegras, all those guys. McTavish is an absolute beauty. So this is more me saying I think Columbus is going to be underrated, and I keep getting roasted for this take because I'm so high on Columbus, but I love their farm system and I love where that team's going. So I would say they're going to be like, imagine they're a new franchise. They're going to win with Fantilli in the next couple of years. And I think the
Oh
Ducks
yeah,
credit.
oh yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, but you can't deny. I personally watched Leo Carlson like at the World Juniors, and I mean the kid's a sniper.
He
He can
is.
shoot.
Mhm.
He's amazing off the wing. I know he's primarily a center on his position, but when I looked at that prediction, I was like, well, first of all, nobody's going to say that Fantilli isn't going second. So I was like, it's a possibility because I heard a lot of analysts saying Leo Carlson was like the most NHL ready out of anybody. And that's a little crazy saying that when, you have Connor Bedard in this draft, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like if you put Leo Carlson at center, just say like a few years down the road, Carlson can center with Zegras going to the left and then Terry to the right. That's still a pretty good line too. And Zegras can play wing. I feel like he would benefit much better. I know he's a great center. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like he can flourish more if he's able to, be himself
Better
with all
wing.
his tricks
I agree. I think he's a better wing. I would
on
say
the wing.
it gives him more
So
room for creativity, I think, and that's what he's mainly there for.
yeah, yeah. This draft, man, was. I mean, I've never been more invested in a draft. I don't know if you have, but it's like for me, I've never
15, no.
I even as a kid, like I wouldn't really look at the draft and I wouldn't be like, I remember 2015 it was McDavid, right? There
Mhm.
was the hype on that. But I just don't remember there being this much hype on every single first round pick
It's
where
so
it's like
strong.
you're getting a possible like first line guy, first pair guy, franchise player.
Yeah.
Well, every player selected was a guy who could positively benefit. There was nothing wrong. There was no like issue with every player they analyzed on ESPN. You'd hear it going all the way down the list. And the funniest part to me in this draft was how many projected high guys went in like the fourth round, the third
Mhm.
round, the fifth round. Luca Pinelli for one. How did he
Mhm.
go? How did he go from a second round projected pick to falling into Columbus's hands?
I feel like Columbus, the winner from the draft, this is where I want to move to next, and then we can talk about Bedard a little bit because I think we
Yeah.
talk about Bedard. One, I agree with you. This was the craziest draft hype I've ever seen in my life. I watched that 2015 one and I watched the 2016 one. So you had Austin Matthews in 2016, you had Connor McDavid in 2015, and none of them were as hyped as this one. And look at what McDavid is now. So, like, do you see how much is behind some of these kids? I think they're all going to be fantastic franchise players. At least
Oh
the
yeah.
top like 7 picks, I think are going to be amazing. And then as far as like some of those go, I think Columbus, if I had to pick one person, was the overall winner of the draft. Like you said, they got a steal in that late round, and they also got a guy that is going to fit. I think he's going to fit way better on their team than Leo Carlson would have.
Amen. I hear you completely 100%. Fantilli definitely needs. I watched him in Michigan because, I'm the college hockey kind of
Yeah.
guy. Fantilli was the centerpiece of the Michigan offense.
Hmm?
Everything ran through him. So watching him play there, I was thinking, there's no way you can have Zegras, McTavish, and Fantilli all as centers on the same team. That is going to create some mishaps, so to speak. That's like it's probably a good problem to have, but I think the Ducks went with the right move there. But I do hear you that Columbus definitely did walk away. Jarmo Kekalainen, he is, if that's how you say his name, he is an amazing general manager. Amazing what he's done with this team.
And keep in mind, we're going to butcher probably every single name. We have a tendency to do that. Some guys,
Igor Sharangovich,
yeah, Igor Sharangovich. That's
that
that's
is that is one of my favorite players of all time.
yeah, Igor Sharangovich. Um,
Can we talk about one more thing with the
yeah,
draft though? I do want
yeah.
to say, I read a thing on an Instagram thread that David Reinbacher, and there was much drama
Mhm.
surrounding Matvey Michkov with his KHL contract. Right,
Yeah,
he's got 2 years left on that.
yeah.
Every single Habs fan that I know on social media was begging for Matvey Michkov, right? And I looked at their needs. Obviously, they need like everything. They're
Yeah.
still like drafting like top five, and they're not finishing as high as they want to be, right?
Mhm.
So the hype's on Michkov, right? They think that it would be a best fit. But I heard that they're sending hate messages towards Reinbacher without even thinking about their defensive situation. I mean, off the top of my head, the best defensive prospect they have right now is Lane Hudson, right? And
That's
when you look at how great of a season Lane Hudson had at Boston University, I mean, man, the kid's an offensive weapon. You could put him
mhm.
at left wing if you want to. Adding David Reinbacher is. I watch his draft film. He's amazing. The kid's a beautiful skater. He's like a ballerina. throwback to Zdeno Chara. But it's like he's amazing. I watched his draft film. He's awesome. He's amazing on the blue line. He shoots just he's awesome. He's
Yeah.
awesome. That's all I can say. And there's so many fans that are mad at the selection, but look at your defense right now. You need a little. Down the road, you're going to be happy you drafted this Austrian kid because he's going to be a force to reckon with. Him and Hudson.
Yeah, and I actually completely agree with you. From the sake, I put Michkov as number 3 in the draft. I thought he would have been great with Columbus. I think he is an absolute stud, and I know he has his KHL contract, but I've seen some reports saying that he could play as soon as next year. Like there's some things coming out about that. So I don't know how the logistics of that work, but when it comes to him, I think he's not a great fit for the Flyers.
You don't think so?
No, I don't
Why
think the
not?
Flyers, I think the Flyers are in such an early stage of rebuilding. And I promise you, Mitch Cobb's going to be traded at some point before they end up using him. Because
Whoa.
think about it like this: like the Flyers are going to be bottoming out, and they're not getting anything. The Flyers traded some of their best assets and got nothing. So like
Kevin Hayes.
Kevin Hayes was their all-star player last year. I don't care if people think the all-star game's a fluke or not. That's a totally different thing. But like when you get selected for an all-star pick, that gives you some trade value. And Kevin Hayes isn't a scrub. He had like 60 something points last year, which isn't fantastic. But Kevin Hayes has never been this amazing player. So if you're trading him and you think you're going to get Torrey Krug back, and then you end up getting a 6th round pick, that shows me that your GM, I think they just got a new GM, didn't they? He's not going to be good. Isn't it some like real like I know who it is. I can't think of his name. Um, but yeah, I think Michkov would have been a great fit for Montreal, but I think Montreal fans are definitely underestimating Heinebacker. And I think Habs fans, do me a favor. For once, give one of your players a chance. Give them a shot. Let them come in. Don't just send hate because you didn't get the pick you wanted. If Ducks fans did that, then Carlson would be not playing for their team. He would want to leave. But they're embracing Carlson, even though they wanted Fantilli. They're embracing Carlson, so you should do the same. Any thoughts about that? Because that I feel like that's such a stupid thing to do when you're going to send a guy hate before you even see his game. Like it's
Yeah.
dumb.
And every single player they could have selected would have been a talented guy. I mean, he hasn't even played a game yet.
Yeah,
And you're trying to give him, you're trying to just give him hate. He didn't choose to go there. This
yeah.
is a draft. The players go where the team tells them to. This isn't
Hmm.
free agency. So if anything, I'm not saying you should send it, but if anything, you should be like talking to the general manager saying, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But you
But at
shouldn't be
the
doing
same
that at all
time,
because
no, like at the same time, man, you shouldn't because it's like these guys are paid to do their job. And I bet you half the GMs in the league are super underqualified. I don't know why. I feel like I think we all could be like, yeah, we'll go on cap friendly and make a better roster than they will. But it's like you're just kids on cap friendly. Let these guys do their job because as much as I complain about like the Fantilli thing, you're right. The Ducks need a strong winger. They don't need a center. They have 2 great young centers. So it makes more sense for them to pick Leo Carlson. In any other draft, if they needed a center, I'm sure they would have picked Fantilli. But this
right.
is the way the draft works. You don't just draft the guy. Like if you have 2 goalies, you're not going to draft the top projected goalie because you need a goalie. That's
You draft the best
yeah.
player that fits your team. I've been saying this about so many drafts.
Mhm.
There's so many times when teams sometimes, or so many times when teams don't sometimes. There are many instances where teams don't select like the best player available because they need a positional piece.
Yeah.
That's probably the right selection. If you look throughout this draft, because there were so many players that were like selected later because these teams are looking position wise. They're not looking at it and saying, for example, we'll go back to Mitchkov. Do we look at any of these teams and say, and the contract situation? They're looking at it and they're like, we can't handle waiting for another 2 years. We want him on our terms, right?
Yeah.
That's how these teams are looking at it. We're not professionals. We can only look from the outside in, right? But
Yeah.
then again, when you look at Kevin Hayes, it's like, why is he worth a 6th round pick? Even when you retain 50% of his salary.
I can't even get started on that. If you're the Flyers GM, I want you to look at me. Terrible trade. I know you're bottoming out, but terrible trade.
It
And
was
now
awful.
I just offer, and we're gonna get more into that because I need to roast the Flyers a little bit more for some of the moves that
That
they're.
was a Bill Belichick trade.
That was if we're
It
going over
was
that
Bill
football,
Belichick
that
trade.
was just dude. Okay. Last thing on the draft. Do you have anything you want to talk about with Bedsy? Obviously, he's going to be a stud. I think he's going to be great in Chicago. And personally, I love the move Chicago has been making with Foligno, Hall. I think it's some good vet guys to bring in. And I've been seeing a couple rumors that I want to talk about after I get your take. So go ahead and let me know what you think.
All I'm gonna say is me and my friends at school were hyping him up the whole dang year. So I'm just excited to see what he's gonna bring for the NHL, not just for like, not what he's gonna do in Chicago, but how he's gonna impact the NHL. I
Mhm.
think he's gonna be a huge factor in the sport's growth. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, the what he's done in juniors alone is just a Hall of Fame worthy type of like, plaque,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'm trying to get tickets to the Bruins home opener because like that's when Bedard's gonna play.
Yeah. Is that their preseason game that he's playing?
I know it's a regular season game. It's the home
Oh, no
opener, and
shot
it's
you're
like
getting tickets to that.
I there's a ton of resales, and they're like $200 to $1,000+, and I'm like,
Jeez, man.
oh my god, the hype
That's
is
you could
here.
tell. You could tell. I think he's more hyped than Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews were, which is
Yeah,
something. It's
and
something.
whenever McDavid's in town, obviously, like the ticket prices are gonna go up. But this is a kid who hasn't even played an NHL game yet, and already the tickets are skyrocketing. Even when the Bruins don't even know how good they're gonna be, because last year the Bruins, like, the tickets were insane, the
Yeah,
prices were off the charts.
rightfully
But this
so.
year, rightfully so, yes, you're the greatest regular season of all time. But like this year, you don't know what
Mhm.
you're doing, and yet here's a kid who's coming in, who, yes, has a lot of hype, but you have no idea
Yeah,
how good he's going to be. So for me, it's like, wow, that must really be some hype.
yeah.
So
So let's since today is free agency day, I think it's important that we kind of go over some of the top ones that are going to be in free agency. And I think we're going to stay with Chicago real quick because there's two guys who could be making a comeback, Marcus. Two
oh
guys
boy,
who could be going back to Chicago to help out Bedsy. Um,
Patrick Kane and Jonathan Tays.
so yeah, so there's a lot of stuff coming up with them. A reason they haven't really been coming out with too many reports on Kaner is because now that he's there and the Blackhawks are making a little bit of an effort to put together at least an NHL roster this season, um, there's talks about Kane at least returning to Chicago
Really?
to play on the same line as Connor Bedard, which then will destroy my argument of saying that Fantilli has a better thing. Because if you put a line of Taylor Hall, Connor McDavid, sorry, not Connor McDavid, Connor Bedard, and then Patrick Kane,
That would be insane.
it's insane. So that's what Chicago should do. But I will say, Chicago, if you have
Yeah,
to pay him like top dollar, I'm not doing it. I love Patrick Kane. He was one of my favorite players growing up, but I think Patrick Kane's career is all but over. I think he's going to be playing the Corey Perry role for most, not as low on the lines, but I think he's on the back end. And if you have Patrick Kane on your roster for Chicago for say 5, 6 million for 2, 3 years, I
that's reasonable because
I'd be okay.
he's still a good player. You
Yeah,
know,
and it's not like saying Patrick Kane's washed because I think he had some injuries last season and stuff.
just
Jonathan Hayes, I'm not bringing back. And if I'm Chicago, I love Captain Serious, but it's time to move on. You can't bring a new era of Hawks hockey and then have Jonathan Toews be your captain. If I'm the Blackhawks, I'm not giving Connor Bedard the C. If I see Connor Bedard with the captains, no, I'm not. You can't give these young guys the captaincy and expect them to like flourish in a role. They're not leaders yet. He doesn't know what the NHL is like. Give Nick Foligno the captaincy. Let him guide Bedard. There's nobody else. Tell me else who else on that Blackhawks team? Seth Jones?
I mean, you could just like leave it with a ton of A's. That's what some rebuilding teams do. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. Some young guys could let the C get to them. You know what I mean? They could
Yeah,
they could see it on their sweater and they're like, oh yeah, I'm the guy. And
yeah,
anyone else in the roster would be like, oh, this guy's a whack job. Why is he trying to talk to us? He's like 21 years old.
yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Exactly. And it's like you shouldn't. But I'm gonna say I think Patrick Kane's gonna resign with the Rangers, even though I've been seeing these rumors. And I think Jonathan Toews is gonna end up on a pretty contending team. If I had to make one pick, if you're gonna like ask me to, I would say he's gonna sign with the Penguins
The Penguins.
if he returns. I think the Penguins would be a really good fit for him. I think you'd then have a nice third guy on your roster. That team is filled with veterans now. They probably could afford Tays if he decides to come back with all of his
Yeah,
illnesses and stuff. But where do you see those two going in particular? Because we're gonna rapid fire through a lot of these free agents and stuff. So
He's probably taking a low contract. You know what I'm saying? He's probably because he knows he's not like that guy anymore. It would be great to see, Crosby with Tays, because that would be like a Canada sort of reunion, because we'll never get the Olympics again.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I could see it working because Pittsburgh's had a bottom six issue ever since their cup years have dwindled.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So Ron Hextall's still the GM, right?
Yeah.
You could you
Oh wait,
he
they
could.
just fired him, didn't they?
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
I'm
didn't they
so
like
bad at.
clean? Yeah, they clean. No, you're good. I think they cleaned house for Pittsburgh. So I think they. No, it's Kyle Dubas now, isn't it?
Oh, it's Dubas. Oh my god, I'm so bad at front office. Oh my gosh.
You're good. Yeah,
Dubas
no.
could look at Dubas. Edit that out. Dubas. Dubas could look at a guy like Tays and say he could benefit our bottom six, right? He could look at him and say, like, we need a veteran presence on the bottom half, because you still have, Crosby and Malkin
Mhm.
leading the top six, right? That would create wonders for those bottom six guys. I don't know who they have off the top of my head, but I know that would do wonders.
Yeah, and they just picked up Riley Smith too, and
Oh yeah.
they've been in big talks for goalies too. So I don't know. I could. That's where I see them going. So what are your picks for Kane and Tays? Where are you sending them? You think Pittsburgh's a good place for Tays?
I mean, yeah, yeah, I could see it working if he takes a low contract. I mean, he's a great center, always has been.
Mhm.
For Kane, though, wouldn't you think that he might want to go to Buffalo?
Yeah, but now be honest with me. I'm a big fan of the Sabres. I love watching the Sabres. They're not ready. They're not
No,
there yet. And Kane
no.
wants to win again. So yeah, you could go play for. I think that that's something Kane should do the last year he decides to play in the NHL, like or second from last. I think Kane should do 1 year in Buffalo and then finish out in Chicago
Yeah, he
on
definitely
veteran
has to
terms.
retire.
Yeah, like
Sorry.
I wouldn't go to Buffalo right now. If Buffalo like 2, 3 years, Buffalo's gonna be a powerhouse. They got a good team. And if they pick up a goalie, which some other guys I got to talk about, there's been some stirrings about Buffalo with these guys. But I think Kane's best chance right now is with the Rangers. I'm very, very, very high on the Rangers. I'm very high on the Rangers. So if
Wow.
they, yeah, I think the Rangers have the most complete roster in the NHL. I just think that their head coach was not the right guy. And I think that they just got this new guy, and I think he's going to help them. So I think it's Durant. I'm going to butcher Trent Gallard or something like that is their new coach.
Gerard Gallant, I
Yeah, I got
think.
it backwards. Yeah. So, yeah. So again, butchering all the names, but yeah, I think the Rangers are going to be pretty good. So Kane should stay in New York. Tays go to Pittsburgh or Winnipeg.
If they're gonna stay, if Kane is gonna stay in New York, he's gonna have to like take some,
Yeah,
he's gonna have to take a little less money, because they still got Lafreniere, their number
I'm
one
dumping
overall
him.
pick.
Nope, get rid of him.
That's
I'm done with Lafreniere in New York.
What do
I,
you mean you're done with him?
I know this is a hot take. I have a very strong opinion about this. I don't think the Rangers are very good at bringing up young talent.
Oh,
And just hear me out. All of the Rangers players on their team right now that are good, are any of them from their system besides Fox? And I'm talking like forward groupings, right? Because Fox, Shesterkin are good. But you have Panarin, acquired through trade. Zibanejad, acquired through trade. What's the other guy they got from Carolina? Um,
uh,
I'm gonna blank, but you know what I'm talking about. He's a center. I'll put it on a little picture of him right here because
Trocheck.
yeah, Trocheck, acquired through trade. And now you're like, okay, I got Kako and I also have Lafreniere. These guys are playing third line minutes. They've been in the league for a couple of years. What are they doing? Like you need to either bring them up to the top lines, let them develop, or send them out for players that are ready now. Because you have a championship ready now roster. So what are you doing? That's
I want to disagree with you here, because I feel as though it's more of a coaching thing. The kid line is a pretty productive line
Mhm.
for third line minutes. From what they get the most production out of any third line in the NHL. That's probably like a blanket statement, but I've read the statistics. They make the most of the time they play together, right? And when you do bring in Panarin, Kane, Tarasenko, all these guys from free agency and acquiring them from trade, how are they supposed to, how are they supposed to bump into the top six when they have to compete against legends?
But that's what I'm saying, though. So maybe this is more a New York problem, which is kind of my point of why I'm saying trade Lafreniere. It's not because Lafreniere is a bad player. Lafreniere
Right.
should be a stud. The Rangers, I love you, New York, but pick a direction. When you're going for a cup, You have veterans, you have young guys, but you don't have two top lines filled with all-star caliber players. And then on your third line, you have your first overall pick for 3 years. What are
That's
we
so
doing?
weird.
It's so the only team in the NHL
So
that
weird.
does this. Because look at the Devils. Jack Hughes is a beauty, and that's because he's playing top line minutes. Him and Lafreniere are drafted around the same time. So
Yeah.
what's going on with that? I mean, I think one of them was a little later. I think one of Kako or Lafreniere was later. So it's a little bit more understandable that they're on the third line. But I don't see that changing next season. Do you see Lafreniere or Kako being on a higher line?
No, and I was gonna say, to bank off your statement, the Stars played it perfectly with the way they draft and the way they, utilize their veterans,
Yeah.
so to speak. Because look at how they're still contending with their picks. Wyatt Johnston, obviously, Rupe Hintz,
Yeah.
Jason Robinson. They're
Mhm.
giving those guys those top line minutes, and look at the results.
Yeah.
We
Calm.
can only imagine. We can only imagine right now how good Alexi Lafreniere and Capocaco and Filipino would be if they were playing second, first line minutes, as opposed to trading for Patrick Kane, trading for Tarasenko. You know what I mean? That
You
just
even trade for
hinders.
them, just put them on a lower line. Like I know respect your guys, but like Patrick Kane and Tarasenko, they're on the back ends of their career. They're great players, but like you're not going to have them for your future. So to appease these guys and bring them in here for a cup run, that's fine. But if you bring back Kane and Tarasenko, you're basically spitting in the face of Kako and Lafreniere and saying, "Yep, you're going down because I'm not playing Lafreniere and Kako above Zibanejad and Panarin. No way."
No,
So obviously you're gonna have to do some other things. So that's my little Rangers rant because Rangers, I love you. Please make the right choices and do the right thing because you could literally win a championship this season if you just did the right thing.
that
Um,
would be awesome.
yeah, and now let's talk about the Winnipeg explosion. I think this is really important. A lot of stuff happening over in Winnipeg, and I know there's not too many Winnipeg Jets fans out there, but I think that this is really important because I think it sort of goes on to a bigger topic that I want to talk about today. Canadian teams having a hard time keeping their all-stars. Yeah, they can't do it. And I think that this is a really big problem in the NHL. There's a lot of people who talk about maybe it's the state of living in Canada or the team fan bases do a lot of pressure for the players and they can't seem to stay there because like we were talking about with Montreal, the fan bases are just judging and getting on people. But Winnipeg in specific, they struggled, man, in the playoffs. I picked them to beat the Golden Knights. I was,
You did?
yeah, I like Winnipeg's roster. Hellebuck was having a Vesna season. Scheifele and Connor are absolutely amazing. I think they're perfect players for the Jets. And now they just lost Pierre-Luc Dubois and they lost Blake Wheeler. And I don't see Scheifele resigning in Winnipeg. So,
Nah.
and neither Hellebuck. So, what are your thoughts on like the whole problem that's happening with Canada right now?
We can talk about Pierre Luc Dubois later, right?
We're gonna, and you can talk about Pierre-Luc Dubois and this together if you want to, because
Okay.
that's a story in itself of what LA gave up for him.
Winnipeg is one of those teams to me where I see such a great roster like every single year where it's like, oh, they got some studs, right? They got some dogs. And, they play a good, regular season, they do well.
Mhm.
But as soon as, playoff time hits, they just absolutely mess it up and they just can't win it.
Yeah.
I don't know why. They have such a great roster. You have one of the best goaltenders in the league in Connor Hellebuck. You have a pretty decent defense with Josh Morrissey, Neil Punk. I mean, you don't have Dustin Bufflin anymore, but when you look at it, they still have a pretty solid defense. And
Yeah.
their offense is really prolific. I mean, you look at Nikolai Ehlers, you look at Kyle Connor. I mean, they got some players. They got a decent top six. And I mean, I don't know about you, man, but I feel like down below in the bottom six, I mean, you look at like Mason Appleton, Adam Lowry, those are some guys that can produce for them at times. But I'm just saying, I just think it's one of those situations where you look at it where a team has a bunch of good players, but it just cannot work out.
Is the Winnipeg Jets situation a coaching issue or a player issue?
I mean, you could say it's a coaching issue. I mean, obviously, you need the right coach to benefit the players, right? That is in many situations in the NHL. You need the right coach and in sports in general. But I just feel like I don't know how many coaching changes they've made because I haven't really been focusing what's going on in the Winnipeg Jets. All I know is this: it's sort of one of those things where I look at it where it's like the roster they got is good enough to compete, but isn't good enough where it's like that's a Stanley Cup contender, right?
Yeah,
I
and
don't
I
think they
feel
got
like
the pieces where you look at it and you say, "Oh yeah, the Jets, they might win the cup." You look at them
yeah.
and then you say like, "Oh, they're a good team."
The Jets are the team I like to chop up to at the trade deadline. I never know if they're buying or selling.
I know, right? It's
Every
so
year
confusing.
they teeter around 500, and it's tough because I like their players and I want them to go. Like I love Hellebuck, and I hate that he's leaving Winnipeg. I hate it, but I also get it. Like the team can't figure it out, and like he's in his prime right now. Why is he going to stay in Winnipeg where the coach is calling him out? Pierre-Luc Dubois leaves after you just lost Line, which I think was a big mistake with what happened with him. I just think Winnipeg has an organizational issue that they need to address. And I also want to just remind the Jets organization, you have the smallest fan base in the NHL. You need to keep a competitive team, or you might not have a team anymore.
Yeah, that is
I'm
true.
just going to show up for another rebuild. The Jets haven't been competitive for a while. This is like the first time these past few years where I feel like the Jets have been competitive. Let's keep that going. You have a team. Stop kicking your players out. It's not a good look. Okay, if every player is leaving in every free agency or trade, it's an organizational problem, and you need to figure
Yeah.
out what that is. If it's the GM, the coach, whatever it might be, just look into it a little bit more and say, hey, what can we do differently to kind of steer these guys to want to come to the coldest place in the world when it comes to like. So you got to do something. Make it a little bit appealing, I guess.
I will say this to bank off what you said at the start. I do believe that there's an issue with the Canadian media. I mean, we're from the United States, so hockey's not. We both know that hockey's not like the number one
Garbage.
thing people care about.
It's
I
garbage.
mean, I mean, an NHL player could walk down the street and nobody would know who that guy is. I mean, Connor McDavid could, and nobody would know who
Very
he is.
true.
You saw Kyle Davidson,
Yeah.
literally Kyle Davidson, the
Hmm.
general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks, the team that was picking number one overall, was unrecognized by a random dude. That's how little hockey is in the United States compared to Canada, where it is religion. In I'm pretty sure if we could do a statistical thing, how many Canadians go to hockey games more than they go to church? It's probably hockey games here, church here. No
Yeah,
joke. You see how they do the World Juniors and
I
everything,
do.
right? And the Toronto media, man, and everything, and you look at just Canadian media in general, there's a lot of pressure on these guys. There's a lot of pressure to constantly perform, to constantly, score a point. They care so much. That's why you saw Gaudreau and Kachuk. They left. They left
Yeah,
Calgary. And Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to Los Angeles, probably because there's not as much pressure.
yeah. It's
There's not
very
as much
true.
pressure.
Like if you go from playing in a Winnipeg Jets, like this is goes back to the Jets fans because we're not talking bad about Jets fans. We're talking about the fact that like they're so loyal and they care so much that you end up putting a lot of pressure on these players. And then when the coaches call them out, they're like, "Well, why am I doing this where I can't have a normal lifestyle? I'm going to go to LA where it's warm, where the fans care, but they don't care so much that I feel like if I lose a season, that my world is over." It's just a lot. And that's why you see these trades. So let's talk about this Pierre-Luc Dubois trade and
Oh boy.
kind of bring this into hockey media again. Pierre-Luc Dubois is a great player. Don't get me wrong. He's a
But
great.
he's not 8 million.
Okay. I'm not going to argue the money because hey, 8 million's 8 million. I think there's players making more than that. If Austin Matthews is going to get 13 million, I think Pierre-Luc Dubois is good for 8. But
Okay.
why are the Kings trading so much for that? The Kings players that they traded away were studs.
Mm-hmm.
Studs. And you added picks to it too.
Gabriel Velarde, Alex Iafallo, Rasmus Kupari, and a 2024 second round pick.
Oh my gosh.
You
LA.
were already contending.
Yeah.
You were already a pretty decent playoff team. And yet you traded some of your best young guys
Not happy. I'm not happy for the
and
Kings.
and and in return got a good center.
A second
A,
line center.
a good center.
Yeah.
Notice how I'm not saying great.
He's
Notice how I'm
second
not
line, right?
saying
Ceiling.
franchise.
Yeah. Second line.
Second line.
Good. I'm glad we're on the same page. I thought you were going to go a different direction than me.
No, this is like one of the trades of all time. What are you doing?
All of these trades in free agency feel like these GMs are backed in a corner and they just feel like they need to make a change for their rosters. I don't get it. Just look over to another Canadian team and let's stop bashing the Habs for a minute. Great trade. Great trade. Go get yourself Newhook. Absolutely amazing trade. Newhook's going to be a stud for that team. But
Yep,
you got Winnipeg fleecing the Kings. Fleecing.
absolutely.
I think the Winnipeg Jets are now better than they were before. I think if I'm Mark Scheifele, Connor Hellebuck, hey, I'm resigning there now.
Yeah,
Those are
because
good players. And you don't have Pierre-Luc Dubois causing drama in the locker room. You can replace that Blake Wheeler role with a different captain. Give it to Kyle Connor. Let him wear the C, or Mark Scheifele, whoever you want to say, and then ride it out. I'm good with the Jets staying the way that they are. And man, LA, you got fleeced. You got it.
and even if Winnipeg it doesn't work out with re-signing Hellebuck and all those guys, they still have a pretty decent like young core that they can work with. You know what I mean? Adding Iafallo and Velarde for one thing that actually bolsters your bottom six a lot, or
Mhm.
even your top six, because Velarde could sneak in there. Iafallo I see more as like a bottom six guy, but they'll still produce.
Yeah.
That's a huge addition for a guy that you were going to spend too much money on,
Yeah, because you would have
in
had to
my
sign
opinion.
him to 8 years, 8 mil, or was it 8.5 million or something like that?
Eight 8 years, 8.5.
Yeah, which no, like look over the pond. Patrick Laine signed with the Columbus Blue Jackets for 4 years. I think that Patrick Laine is a better player than Pierre-Luc Dubois. He's got a higher
Absolutely.
ceiling. Like if he could stay healthy, he's got a higher ceiling.
And
That's,
Pierre Luc Dubois, we're not discrediting that he
no,
isn't a good
no,
player because we know he's a good player.
no. We're
But
talking
Patrick
about the
Laine is
trade. We're talking about this is strictly about the trade. I love Pierre-Luc
right.
Dubois, great player. Not about that. The Kings gave up too much and
Yeah,
they jumped too quickly and signed an 8 year deal. We love players getting money, but we don't love stupid deals for stupid trades. That's a bad hockey trade for the Kings. And I think they're gonna regret that one. And hey, listen, I'll die on that sword. I will. I don't like that trade. It's not a good one for them. Yeah, there it is. Um,
well,
yeah, and where do you think you see Connor Hellebuck going? With the Jets kind of imploding right now, Connor Hellebuck wants to leave. Where do you see him ending up in this free agency class?
I mean, I'd love to see him go take the villain route and just go to Edmonton, right? Because when you look at it, it's like they can't figure out a goaltender,
No?
right?
Yeah.
So if he goes, I mean, half the league probably could use like a star goaltender, right? The
Yeah.
way I look at it. But the one place I'd really love for him to be is Edmonton, but they're not going to be able to pay that. They have been cap dumping, right? They got rid of Costin and Yamamoto.
Yeah.
They have been cap dumping,
But
so
let me say it like this. Okay, this could happen. This is a good thing. If you Now I know Oilers fans can't stand this. Trade Ryan Nugent Hopkins. Trade
ooh,
Ryan Nugent Hopkins. And let me tell you why. He's never going to have a season like he had this past year. He's never going to be more valuable on the trade market than he is right now. And I know he's a hometown favorite. Okay. We all know this. We know you Oilers fans will die and comment on this till the end of time. But you need a goalie, and you can replace Ryan Nugent Hopkins with any other guy because whoever plays with McDavid and Draisaitl is going to pot above 80 points. And it's just
Matt
that.
Duchene.
Huh?
Matt Duchene.
No, no, no. That's another one I'm bringing up. Matt Duchene is coming to Boston. And I'll get back
What?
to that. I'm stopping you right there. Hang on. Hang on. I just think that the Oilers should go trade for Connor Hellebuck. I think it would be a good idea. I think they need a goalie. If you can send Jack Campbell in like a three-way trade to a team like the Sharks, who are in a rebuild and they'll eat up the cap for picks if the Oilers even have picks anymore. I think that's the route you got to go. You got to dump some of those goalie contracts. I'm a little bit out on Stuart Skinner. I'd like to see how it goes, but I don't like the way he played. Even though it was his rookie year, I'm not like super high on Stuart Skinner. I think he needs a couple more years, and I think Connor Hellebuck, if you sign him to like a 4 or 5 year deal, I think then you'd have Stuart Skinner in the farm system, sort of similar to the way that the Bruins did it with like Swayman and Allmark. Like you got the older guy, you got the younger guy coming up, let him get his reps in, and then do it that way. But the Matthew Shane thing broke out yesterday, and
Right.
I was thinking, man, you'd be a good fit with Boston.
But can we what's he gonna take? Is it like worth it? You know what I mean? Like he's a good player, but I don't know if that's the direction I want Boston to go in.
Well, I've always been a big Matthew Shane fan. I think he's in his prime right now, and I think the Bruins have a little bit of maneuvering to do, but I would get rid of some of the younger D guys like Grizzly and Carlo, and I would sign him onto a deal.
Oh,
We need a center.
oh,
We need a center, man. And I think the Bruins would be extremely, extremely regretful if they don't sign a guy like him or Ryan O'Reilly to a deal to get a top line center because I don't believe in Zaka and Coyle to be our top line center. Zaka's a good 2, Coyle's a good 3. We need 1. And if Bergeron doesn't come back, the Bruins got to do something, man. And I've been hearing Bertuzzi might not even come back either. So I'm just saying,
you're on thin ice.
I'm not on thin ice.
You are on thin
I'm
ice
not on
saying
thin
to
ice. I'm
trade
saying,
Carlo and Grizzly.
I don't want both of them to be traded, Carlo or Grizzly, because for a salary dump thing. Because it's not like I would trade other guys, but you're not trading anybody else like Marchand or Pasta who are making the big money. So if we're trading Allmark, I trade Allmark to get a guy, but I just for a salary dump because I don't think they're going to keep both of them. I would love to keep both, but I don't think they're going to. So being realistic and taking my fan bias out of it, that's what I think they should do. I think they should go get a center because I think it's important to keep Pastrnak happy. And who's he going to play with? Zaka on the top line.
Well, let's put it this way. The big issue that many Bruins fans have been saying is losing Tyler Bertuzzi. That's like the one thing
Mhm.
every Bruins fan wanted. It was, I mean, he's only played 28 games. I've never seen a fan base love a player through 28 games like they do Tyler Bertuzzi, right? And he's oh my god, he's an amazing like offensive two-way guy. And when I say two-way, I mean in the offensive zone.
Yeah.
He's amazing at both parts of being an offensive player. But when I look at the Bruins' direction, I don't think that dumping some money to get more players to spend your money on is a good idea because at this point for the Bruins, you got to bring in a new era. You have to. The days of trying to go for a Stanley Cup are far from over. You ever since the Stanley Cup in 2019, you have just gone down, 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 down. Like it's been like Stanley Cup, second round loss, first round loss, first round loss. Like it's you gotta stop. You
I don't
have to
believe
stop.
that. I don't because you want to know why I don't believe that? Because I still think the Bruins have an amazing roster, and
Yes.
I still think the Bruins are going to make the play. Okay, let me say it like this: Bruins are making the playoffs next season. If they add a top line center, you can't tell me that they won't make the Stanley Cup if the Florida Panthers just made the Stanley Cup. And it's not saying like the Bruins are going to. I'm saying it's just more about competing and getting to the playoffs because once you get there, you have as much of a shot as anyone else. Now, if the Bruins don't get a center, I agree with you 100%. Just ride out a couple years, but you're not selling, man. If you just sign a guy like Pastrnak to $11 million, you're not. You're ready to compete still. That's kind of the way it is.
I'll say that I'm not saying the Bruins should be selling. Moreover, they should just retool a bit, but be careful with the money because you have a ton of free agents, a
Mhm.
ton, some valuable ones at that. Jeremy Swayman for one. You cannot lose a young goaltender like that, especially a solid young goaltender like that. 24 years old, you lock him up on a 4-year deal. Trent Frederick had an amazing breakout season, 30 points. That's pretty good for him, considering we only saw him as the guy who would drop the mitts at any given moment and take a stupid penalty. You re-sign him. Jacob Lauko, amazing skater, amazing fourth line depth guy. You take him back in. You maybe shuffle in some of the young guys. But if you have enough money where you can still have some cap space to work with, right? You sign me. I don't know how much Matt Duchene would want. That's the thing. Because his last cap hit
How
was
much you
8
willing to
million.
pay Matthew Shane?
What do you say?
How much you willing to pay Matthew Shane?
I
I
don't
would say
know.
6 mil.
6? I'd give me like 5.5.
I don't think so. I think six.
Because he took 8 on his last deal with Nashville, right? He knows how good he is, right? We know how good he is.
Yeah.
But the Bruins have to be careful with their money. You know what I'm saying? You're opening up money to pay money to these other guys. And are you sure that it's going to work out for you in the long run?
I don't see them re-signing Swayman.
What?
I
You
don't.
don't think it's going to happen?
I don't think Swayman wants to stay
Why not?
because he's from Alaska. He has family issues happening or something like that without getting into the personal reasons. But
Oh,
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Swayman's got some stuff going on. So so this is what I've been hearing a little bit of. This is a big rumor I've heard. I think I put it in a little bit of our notes for you about Connor Hellebuyck coming to Boston.
All
Um,
right.
Linus Allmark and Jeremy Swayman, if the Bruins decide to move on from both of them because of personal reasons, I would like to keep one of them, but I would, if I'm going to trade Swayman, I don't know why. I just don't know why they would want to keep Allmark with all the rumors coming out about him trading. But I would keep Allmark or Swayman, but if you get rid of both, I would sign Hellebuyck. Like
You could?
yeah, and this is what I'm saying. Like, I think you sign Swayman. If I'm the Bruins, I should have pulled up my little GM thing for you, but if I'm the Bruins, what I'm doing is I'm signing a center, whether that's Matthew Shane, Ryan O'Reilly, or some other guy who's going to be available. If you don't do it this year, you sure as heck better do it next year because the free agency class for next season is amazing. And you don't have anybody in your farm system. And this is my big problem. They have a couple guys. Like I like Lysell, but he's not going to be NHL ready for the next like 2, 3 years. So you got to get someone. You can't just like live in this weird zone where you're like, yeah, we'll use Zaka because like Zaka was a great pickup, but he is not a top line center. And you have to address that need. And now we're getting too deep into Bruins talk, so I think it's important that we just move on a
Move
little.
on.
Yeah, and let's just talk about some of the other trades that happened. We'll just do like a rapid fire thing here just to kind of wrap this up. Mackenzie Blackwood to the Sharks. Do you care?
Uh, good for the Sharks.
All right.
Well, I don't know when my boy Magnus Krona from Denver is going to get his shot, but thanks, Mackenzie, for ruining that.
Yeah, love it. What about Tyler Toffoli leaving the Flames? Does that go more into the Canadian issue that we were talking about?
Everyone was extremely on the fact that New Jersey won, and they probably getting to Foley is probably like make that even furthers my argument where I put out a top 10, too early top 10. I put New Jersey second. They're going to be a force to reckon with, especially with having their best guys under $10 million.
With Timo Meyer too, that's crazy that they got.
Timo Meyer, $8 million. Jack Hughes, $8 million. I think Jesper Bratt took like 7 point something,
Even
maybe.
better. Even better.
Which is like the cap's gonna go on. There's no doubt about that. Probably little by little,
Yeah.
but it's going to benefit them so much. Where you look at other teams, like for example, the Maple Leafs, they're paying Tavares, Matthews, Marner 10, and yes, Dubas did a great job of building out a bottom six, but the Devils are gonna have an even better. They're gonna have a ball making a stacked like bottom six because they stacked up their top six where they managed their money so well.
Yeah.
They knew they couldn't afford Severson with all the offense they needed. So they shipped him off. They know they got Luke Hughes coming up. They know they got, is it Nemec?
Yep.
Yeah, Nemec is coming up too. Thanks for the approval. They got they got all this talent.
They're
They're
studs.
gonna go crazy.
I'm telling you, I've made my early prediction to a couple people. I think the Devils have a very, very good chance of winning the cup next year.
Next year?
Next year. If they this is the key though. If they get a goalie. Akira Schmidt is
Oh
going to be a good
yeah.
backup. Move on from Vanacek. I've never believed in Vanacek. I didn't like him in Washington. Don't like him in New Jersey. If I'm the Devils, I'm going and picking up John Gibson. Get me Gibson.
Oh,
Get me Gibson. I'm trading with the Ducks. I'm going to get Gibson, or I'm finding a guy in free agency, trading for Allmark, doing what I got to do because you have a chance here at Devils where you, like we just talked about, your cap situation is amazing. And you have players where you could literally pick up a goalie and then add at the deadline. Like you are that in that great of a position, unlike the Bruins who are up against the cap the whole offseason, or like the Maple Leafs too. You have this capability to do it. Go all in, bring your franchise a championship because this is a year where a lot of the top teams like Toronto and Boston are struggling a little bit. They don't have everything like put together as much as they usually do, and you kind of got a little bit of a hole to go in and go get yourself a championship if you make the right moves. And I think there's a couple teams that are just a goalie away from that.
It's a good window to have personally. You could say like, oh, they're still too young, they still need time. You know what I'm saying? And anything could happen next year for the New Jersey Devils. The sky's the limit for them.
Yeah.
But it's like you could also argue like, are they too young to start like doing this? But then again, you look at for one. I remember in the past, Sidney Crosby won his first Stanley Cup at like what, 22.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to draw comparisons, but just for the sake of situational thing, they still got 10 mil. They could definitely afford Gibson. They could definitely afford
Yeah.
a good goaltender.
They
That
can afford
and they
Hellebuck.
and they still have money to work with where they could, bring in some depth pieces because any Stanley Cup team needs depth pieces, and New
Now,
Jersey
let me ask you
definitely.
though, bro. Is Connor Hellebuck a free agent or do they need to trade him?
I think
He's an
he's.
RFA.
Oh my God, where are they? Go
Is he an
down, go
RFA,
down.
bro?
He's a free agent next year.
That's
He's
not
get he,
that's not a
he's
bad
getting
trade.
he's getting dealt. He's getting dealt. He's
No,
gone.
Connor Hellebuck's gone. Sorry, Jets fans. If I
He's
was the Devils,
gone.
I'd make that move. I'd make that move.
I'd go for Gibson.
I would go for Gibson too. But
Gibson
you'll have to trade more because Gibson's on a longer contract.
Gibson reminds me of sort of like a. I keep
I love
comparing. I
Gibson.
love comparing. Remember how the Avalanche just said, "F it, let's go for Darcy Kemper,"
Yeah,
and we're all like, "Darcy Kemper, what are you doing? Get a
yeah,
guy, get yourself a goalie who you can say like, oh, he'll work with us. We got the guys to do it. We
yeah.
got the guys who will protect him." Gibson faced the most shots in the NHL last year of any goaltender. That poor guy needs some help.
He does.
Please get him out.
Get him
Get
out
him
of
out.
Anaheim. Free the man. Free him. Oh man. All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up everything. Honestly, I think the biggest thing that just needs to be kind of addressed is the issue with Canada, and I hope that some players end up wanting to go there again because I think that that's kind of the overall topic of this trade deadline and free agency. A lot of the Canadian teams are just moving on from their players, and I think it's sad. So we really hope that some players and GMs and coaches can all figure out a way to kind of make the Canadian teams a better place to be so that they can compete more, be in more cup finals. Canadian teams haven't won since 1993. We'd love to see them back. So
They deserve a team that can be like the Canada's team because it is tough to see because more than anything, hockey's Canada's sport. Like I
mhm.
said before, it's their religion. So they do deserve a team where it's like, well, at least one where they can say like, oh, they're close to winning the cup. There's the conspiracy with Gary Bettman and everything, but for me, it's like when you look at it this way, if the NHL does it right, they could market. It's a blessing in disguise for the NHL because they're getting stars in American markets where it's like, oh, we can take say Connor Bedard, like, oh, here's a superstar that's going to like a huge American market like Chicago. You didn't have that with like McDavid and Matthews when you sent them up north. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a blessing in disguise for the growth of the NHL in the United States, but no doubt Canada deserve at least like, one team to compete. But
Yeah,
they'll get the Senators. That's my pick. Senators are going to be a huge team.
I agree with you on that. They're slept on. But last topic, then we should sign off here. Is Austin Matthews resigning in Toronto?
Yeah,
How much?
they're gonna give him like 3 years.
No.
No, they're gonna give him. They're
Three
gonna give him.
years?
No, they're gonna give him the max. They're gonna give him the max. There's no way they
Three
don't.
years?
I was saying 3 years at the start because I read something on like Puck Empire, a headline, but they're gonna give him whatever he wants. Why
Pay the
would they let
man.
him go?
Pay the man. Toronto.
He's getting paid. He's gonna get an 8-year, $13.5 million extension. Charles Barkley guarantee. That's what I'm gonna say. That's a
But how much
guarantee.
would you pay him? And how long?
13.5. He's
You think he's
amazing.
perfect? Perfect. I agree.
Give him whatever he wants.
I agree.
Buy him a house. Give him half price off at Tim Hortons.
Give him 50% of the team. Do what you got to do.
Kylian Mbappe. Give him whatever part of the team he needs.
Did you see him in those St. Patty's, the Pats skates that he was wearing? Absolutely
The
sick. Yeah, he was
He was.
wearing throwback skates in the off season. Those green skates that they wear for the past jerseys. I
They
love it.
should wear those more.
I love those jerseys.
I love it when they wear those jerseys.
I love them too. But that kind of wraps up our free agency talks, guys. Let us know who you think our predictions were. If you think we did a pretty good job, I think it's going to happen today, so we'll be keeping it up.
Yeah, get
Hopefully,
ready for the
this
news.
age is pretty good. Hopefully, because we're making this like a couple hours before free agency. So, yeah, thank you guys for tuning in to this one. Go ahead, follow our socials, TikTok, Instagram, and all that. And we'll see you guys for the next episode.